Morgan had spent 3 years living on the space station called Vela 9. It was a massive floating city in the darkness of space, where more than 40 different alien species lived and worked together, was a human, and that made her special in ways she never asked for. Earth had been classified as a Category 7 by the Galactic Council. This meant that her home planet was so dangerous and so hostile that the fact humans had survived there at all made them terrifying to most other species in the galaxy. She worked as a security consultant on the station. Her job was simple. She stood around looking serious while aliens from fragile worlds negotiated trade deals and signed contracts. Most of the time, her presence alone was enough to stop any trouble before it started. The aliens looked at her and saw a predator. They saw someone whose ancestors had fought against lions and wolves and sharks. They saw someone whose body had been shaped by millions of years of survival on a planet that wanted to kill everything on it. Was not tall by human standards. She stood at 5 feet and 6 inches, but to the thin and delicate or the soft-bodied she might as well have been a monster from their nightmares. Her muscles were denser than theirs, her bones were harder, her reflexes were, and her eyes had that look that all creatures shared, the look of something that knew how to hunt. But today something felt wrong on the station. The lower levels had grown quiet over the past week. The usual crowds of merchants had thinned out. People were whispering in corners and looking over their shoulders. Had noticed it, and she had reported her concerns to the station administrator. His name was, and he was with 6 limbs and a body covered in hard plates. He had dismissed her worries with a wave of his upper arms. He had told her that humans saw danger everywhere. He had called it paranoia. He had laughed at her and sent her away. But trusted her instincts. Those instincts had kept her alive through the Martian collapse when the colony domes had cracked and thousands had died. They had kept her alive through pirate raids in the Outer Rim when her ship had been boarded, and she had fought her way to the escape pods. They had kept her alive through a dozen situations that should have ended her. So when she noticed the same group of aliens following her for 3 days in a row, she started to prepare. They were 7 of them. They were tall and covered in dark scales. They had 4 arms and faces that looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a bad dream. They were known throughout the galaxy as mercenaries, expensive ones. Whoever had hired them had deep pockets and a serious grudge. Kept her movements predictable. She followed the same schedule every day. She wanted them to think she was blind to their presence. She wanted them to get comfortable. All the while she was counting their numbers and memorizing their faces and noting which corridors they avoided. On the 7th day, she got her answer about why they were following her. A message arrived on her personal communicator. It was encrypted with codes she recognized from her old life. The message was from Director Hayes at the United Earth Intelligence Service. He had been her commanding officer years ago. The message was short. It said that 3 weeks ago they had intercepted communications from something called the Syndicate of the Outer Reach. The Syndicate had placed a bounty on all human security personnel working in neutral space, was priority target number 4 on their list. The message told her not to trust station security. It said an extraction team was coming for her. It said they would arrive in 72 hours. It told her to stay alive. Read the message twice and then she deleted it. 72 hours was a long time when you had 7 killers watching your every move. She finished her work shift like nothing was wrong. She returned to her small quarters on level 5, and then she started to pack. She did not take everything, she only took what mattered. Her service pistol was a compact energy weapon that most aliens considered too powerful for personal. Her combat knife was made from Terran steel, which was harder and denser than anything the galactic standard could match. She packed medical supplies and food bars and a change of clothes. Then she waited in the darkness of her room. They came for her at 3 in the morning station time. That was when the corridors were and the security patrols were. Heard them coming long before they reached her door. Their footsteps were heavy and coordinated, too precise to be casual walkers. She smiled in the darkness. They thought they were hunting her. They thought they had cornered their prey. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The door to her quarters exploded inward. A breaching charge had torn it from its frame. They poured into the room with their pulse rifles raised. They were expecting to find a sleeping human, or maybe a frightened one scrambling for cover. They found an empty room. The bed had been arranged to look occupied in the dim light, pillows under blankets, the trick in the book. By the time the lead mercenary realized the deception, it was already too late. Dropped from the ceiling, she had wedged herself between the support beams hours ago, waiting for this moment. She landed on the second through the door. Her knife found the gap between his armor plates before his brain could understand what was happening. She used his falling body as a shield and absorbed the wild pulse fire from his companions. Then she drew her pistol. 3 shots, 3 bodies fell. The remaining scattered. Their training took over and they dove for cover, but was already moving. Her body was operating on pure muscle memory. She had trained for close quarters combat since she was 16 years old, first in the Earth Corps and later in intelligence work that officially never happened. To her, this was not a fight, it was a dance, and she knew every single step. The fourth tried to come at her from the left side. She put a round through his throat before he could raise his weapon. The fifth came from behind, and he was than she expected. His clawed hand raked across her shoulder and tore through her jacket and drew blood. She ignored the pain. Pain was just information. She pivoted inside his guard and drove her knife up through his jaw. Two of them were left now. And they ran. Let them go. She needed answers, and dead mercenaries could not talk. She took a communicator from one of the bodies. Then she slipped into the corridor and disappeared into the maintenance tunnels that ran through the station like veins through a body. The hunt was just beginning, but now the roles had changed. The prey had become the predator, and the predator was angry. Moved through the maintenance tunnels like a ghost. The station was a maze of pipes and cables and narrow passages that most species never used, but had spent 3 years learning every corner of Vila 9. She knew shortcuts that did not appear on any map. She knew hiding spots where she could disappear for hours. She knew how to move without making a sound. Her shoulder burned where they had clawed her. Blood was soaking through her jacket, but she pushed the pain aside. She had been hurt worse before. On Mars, when the dome collapsed, she had crawled through broken glass with a piece of metal in her leg. Compared to that, this was nothing. She tracked the 2 surviving mercenaries using the communicator she had taken from their dead friend. They were heading for level 7. That was the industrial sector of the station. It was full of machines and storage containers and dark corners where bodies could disappear for weeks. The perfect place for an ambush or a trap. Followed them anyway. She found them in a maintenance bay hidden behind a stack of cargo containers. They were with each other in their native language. Their translators were switched off so she could not understand the words, but she could read their bodies. They were afraid. One of them kept back toward the upper levels. He wanted to leave. He wanted to abandon the mission and run. The other one was more stubborn. He pulled out his own communicator and started speaking rapidly. He was reporting to someone, could guess what he was saying. The target was more dangerous than expected. They needed backup. The bounty was not worth dying for. She decided to help them make their choice. Stepped out of the shadows with her pistol raised. Her voice was calm and steady when she spoke. She told them she was only going to ask once. She asked them who had hired them. The stubborn one spun around and tried to bring his rifle up, shot him in the knee. Then she shot him in the shoulder. He collapsed to the floor screaming in pain. The other threw down his weapon immediately. He raised all 4 of his arms in surrender. He had not to kill him. He said they were just following orders. He said the syndicate had paid them. He said they were told she was dangerous and that she had killed syndicate agents before. They were supposed to bring her in alive if possible, dead if necessary. Kept her pistol aimed at his chest. She asked him who the syndicate contact on this station was. The syndicate was not supposed to operate this far into neutral space. Someone local had to be helping them. They looked at his wounded friend on the floor. Then he looked at and saw something in her eyes that made him talk. He said it was the station administrator himself. He said had been working with the syndicate for years, smuggling and intelligence and whatever else they needed, had arranged everything, the surveillance on, the access codes to get into her section, the timing of the security patrols. He wanted her gone. Felt cold anger settle in her chest. She had suspected there was corruption on this station, but not at that level, had access to everything. He knew where every human on Vila 9 lived and worked and slept. If he was working with the syndicate, then none of them were safe. She asked how many other humans were being targeted tonight. The shook his head. He said he did not know. They were only assigned to her, but there were other teams, many other teams. Made a decision right then. She could not save everyone by herself. Not alone and not with 72 hours until the extraction team arrived, but she could do something. She could make enough noise to blow the whole operation wide open. She stunned both with precise shots. Then she used their communicator to hack into the station emergency broadcast system. It took her less than a minute to get past the security. Had not updated the system in years, and human encryption software was generations ahead of what the rest of the galaxy used. Her voice echoed through every speaker on the station. She identified herself as Lieutenant Morgan of United Earth Security. She announced that station administrator had been compromised by the syndicate of the Outer Reach. She told all human personnel to arm themselves and proceed to the diplomatic quarter. She said it twice. This is not a drill. Then she switched off the communicator and headed for level 3. It was time to have a conversation with The administrative sector was in chaos when she arrived. Her broadcast had thrown everything into confusion. Species that had lived peacefully side by side for years were now watching each other with suspicion. Merchants were locking their shops, were flooding toward the docking bays trying to get off the station before things got worse. It was exactly what wanted. She moved through the crowds easily. Nobody was paying attention to one human woman when the whole station was falling apart. She reached the corridor that led to his office and stopped. It was empty, no guards, no security drones, nothing. That meant one of two things. Either had already run away, or he was waiting for her with everything he had. Bet on the second option. Were proud creatures. They cared about status and reputation more than almost anything. Running would mean admitting defeat. Had spent years building his position on this station. He would not abandon it without a fight. She approached carefully. The outer office was deserted. Holographic displays were blinking with unread messages. A cup of something was cooling on a desk. Everyone had left in a hurry. The inner office was sealed behind heavy blast doors. They were designed to withstand military weapons. Studied them for a moment, then she smiled. The people who designed this station had not thought about human creativity. She went back to a control panel in the maintenance junction. Every room on Vela 9 had independent life support. It was a safety feature, but the system could also be used to change the pressure in individual rooms. Did not want to kill, she needed him alive. So instead of taking the air out of his office, she increased the pressure inside. She raised it by about 30% over 5 minutes. For a human, that would be uncomfortable. For a whose species came from a low-pressure world with thin air, it was agony. The blast doors opened after 3 minutes, came staggering out. His 6 limbs were uncoordinated and his breathing was rough and painful. He had a pulse pistol in his grip, but he could barely hold it. Took the weapon from him with one smooth motion. She greeted him politely. She said they needed to talk. She dragged him back into his office and returned the air pressure to normal. Then she accessed his personal computer while he recovered. The encryption was simple by human standards. She cracked it in under a minute. What she found made her blood run cold. The syndicate operation was bigger than she had ever imagined. Was not just a local contact. He was a regional coordinator. He oversaw syndicate activities across a dozen different stations. The bounty on human security personnel was just one small part of a much larger plan. And buried in the files was something called Project Extinction. Stared at the files on his computer. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. Project Extinction was not just a military operation, it was something far worse. The syndicate had spent years placing agents in key positions throughout the galaxy. They had operatives near human ambassadors and colony administrators and military commanders. When a signal was sent, all of those operatives would strike at the same time. They would kill every important human leader in known space in a single coordinated attack. Without leadership, the human colonies would fall into chaos. Without organization, they would be easy targets. The syndicate could move in and take whatever they wanted: resources, territory, power. It was a plan to cripple humanity forever. And according to the files, the signal was scheduled to be sent in less than 24 hours. Everything to a secure data drive. Then she turned to who had recovered enough to sit up against the wall. His compound eyes were filled with hatred, but there was fear there too. He told her she had no idea what she had done. He said the syndicate would never forgive this. They would hunt her across the galaxy. They would destroy everyone she had ever known. He called her a fool. He said she thought she was a predator, but she was nothing compared to them. Leaned close to him. Her voice was soft and cold when she spoke. She told him something about humans. She reminded him that they came from they grew up fighting for survival against everything their planet could throw at them. Predators and diseases and natural disasters and each other. She asked him if his syndicate thought they were scary. She told him they had never seen what humans could do when they were truly cornered. She left him there in the ruins of his office. She had bigger problems to deal with now. The diplomatic quarter was crowded when she arrived. Her broadcast had worked. Every human on the station had gathered there. They had armed themselves with whatever they could find, pistols and tools and metal bars. They were not soldiers. They were traders and engineers and scientists and diplomats, but they were also humans. They knew how to fight when they had to. An older man stepped forward when he saw. His name was Daniel Shaw, and he was a retired cargo pilot in his 60s. He had served in the Belt Wars decades ago, and though his body had slowed down, his mind was still sharp. He had taken charge of organizing the... He asked what was happening. She told him everything about the syndicate, about Project Extinction. She showed him the data she had recovered. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, then he said they had work to do. Over the next few hours, they transformed the diplomatic quarter into a fortress. They piled cargo containers and furniture to create barricades. They set up watchposts at every entrance. They established communication systems so everyone could stay in contact. They turned the corridors into kill zones where any attacker would face overlapping fire from multiple directions. But knew that alone would not be enough. She needed to stop Project Extinction, and to do that she needed to decode the rest of the files she had taken from. She found help in an unexpected place. Dr. Lisa Grant that meant she studied alien languages and cultures. She was one of the best in her field, and she had spent 15 years working with dozens of different species. In that time, she had made contacts throughout the galaxy, including some within the Syndicate itself. Lisa explained when approached her. She said it was not what it sounded like. The Syndicate was not one organization. It was a collection of different groups with different goals. Some of them were criminals, others were more complicated. She had worked with a few of them on academic projects, translating ancient texts and that sort of thing. They trusted her. Asked if she could help decode the files. Lisa took the data drive and looked at it carefully. She said she could try, but she warned that if the Syndicate found out she had helped them, she would be as dead as anyone. They did not forgive betrayal. Promised to get her on the first transport out when the extraction team arrived. She gave her word. Lisa hesitated, then she agreed. While Lisa worked on the files, checked on things were holding together, but tensions were high. Several alien species had complained about the humans taking over the diplomatic quarter. They called it a violation of station rules. Others were more understanding. They could see that the humans were responding to a real threat. Our ambassador approached. There were crystalline beings whose bodies looked like living glass. This one was named, and their voice sounded like wind chimes when they spoke. Said they had been watching with interest. She had exposed corruption and disrupted a major criminal operation. The collective wanted to offer their cautious support. Raised an eyebrow at the word cautious. Explained that they were careful by nature. They did not make promises easily, but they recognized strength when they saw it. Humans were a young species by galactic standards. Many had wondered if they would survive contact with the rest of the galaxy. It appeared those doubts had been misplaced. Thanked them, it was not much, but it was something. 6 hours later, Lisa called to the command center they had set up in an empty conference room. Lisa's face was pale, and her hands were shaking when she handed back the data drive. She said she had decoded the files. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She said it was worse than they thought. Project Extinction was not just about killing human leaders. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. The Syndicate wanted to prove that humans could be destroyed. They wanted to show every other species that they were not as dangerous as everyone believed. They wanted to break the fear that protected humanity. And the signal to begin was going out in less than 18 hours. Looked at the data, her mind was racing. The extraction team would not arrive in time. Even if she sent the information to Earth, it would take hours to reach anyone who could act on it. She was running out of options. Then she remembered something Lisa had said earlier. Asked about the different factions within the Syndicate, she asked if any of them would want to stop this, if any of them would see a war with humanity as bad for business. Lisa thought about it. She said there was one group, the Merchants Guild. They made their money from trade with human colonies. A war would destroy their profits. They might be willing to help. Asked if Lisa could contact them. Lisa was silent for a long moment. Then she straightened up and there was new strength in her eyes. She said she would try. It was a long shot, knew that, but it was the only shot they had. She went back to the barricades to prepare for whatever was coming next. The hours crawled by like wounded animals, had never felt time move so slowly. Every minute that passed was another minute closer to the signal being sent, another minute closer to Project Extinction becoming reality. Lisa had sent her message to the Merchants Guild, but there was no way to know if it would make any difference. The guild was famous for being careful. They calculated every decision based on profits and losses. Stopping Project Extinction would mean turning against their own allies in the Syndicate. That was a big risk even for the promise of continued trade with human worlds. All could do was prepare for the worst. She gathered everyone in the diplomatic quarter and explained the situation. She did not hide anything. She told them about Project Extinction. She told them about the signal that was going out in less than 12 hours. She told them that help might not arrive in time. Some people reacted with fear, others with anger. A few just stared at the floor, unable to process what they were hearing. These were ordinary people. They had come to this station to work and trade and build lives for themselves. They had not signed up for war. It was Daniel Shaw who brought them back together. He stood up in front of everyone, and his voice cut through the fear like a blade. He told them he knew this was scary. He said he knew it seemed impossible, but he reminded them that they were humans. They had faced impossible before. He talked about their ancestors, how they had survived ice ages when the world froze over, how they had survived plagues that killed millions, how they had survived 2 world wars that had torn their planet apart. He talked about how they had built rockets from spare parts and flown to the moon, how they had settled planets that should have killed them, how they had done all of it because they refused to give up. He told them they might be outnumbered, they might be, but they were not out of options. As long as they were alive, they could fight, and as long as they could fight, they had a chance. Something changed in the room after that. Fear gave way to determination. Despair was replaced by purpose. They were not just a group of civilians waiting to be rescued anymore. They were humans, children of her, and they would not go quietly. The Syndicate forces arrived 2 hours before dawn. They came in 3 assault shuttles carrying nearly 100 mercenaries. It was a mixed force of and half a dozen other species known for their skill in combat. They expected to find a disorganized group of soft civilians, easy targets for trained killers. They found something else entirely. The humans had turned the diplomatic quarter into a death trap. Every corridor was a kill zone. Every entrance was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Every shadow could hide a defender. The barricades were solid and the people behind them were ready. The first wave of attackers hit the barricades and was thrown back in less than 10 minutes. They had expected weak resistance. Instead, they ran into a wall of pulse fire and determination that stopped them cold. The second wave tried to flank around the main. They found every alternative route blocked or trapped. Humans had spent the night for exactly this kind of attack. They had thought through every possibility and planned for each one. The third wave hesitated. The commanders were about how to proceed. They had lost too many soldiers already. This was supposed to be easy, and it was turning into a disaster. That hesitation was exactly what had been waiting for. She led a counterattack through the maintenance tunnels. She had gathered a small team of volunteers, just 12 people, but all of them had military or security training from their past lives. They moved fast and silent through the dark passages that ran behind the walls. They hit the Syndicate forces from behind while they were focused on the barricades ahead. It was a classic strike. Hit hard and disappear before the enemy could react, then hit again from a different direction, and again, and again. The effect on the Syndicate morale was devastating. These were supposed to be soft targets, weak civilians who would crumble under pressure. Instead, they were facing warriors who seemed to appear from nowhere, who struck without warning and vanished into the shadows, who fought with a ferocity that the mercenaries had never encountered before. This was what it meant to fight. Humans did not surrender, humans did not give up. Humans had been shaped by millions of years on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. Fighting was in their blood, it was in their bones, it was the core of everything they were. The battle raged for 3 hours. 3 hours of pulse fire and screaming, 3 hours of charges and countercharges, 3 hours of blood and pain and desperate courage. The humans held their lines against an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1. They did not break, they did not run, they stood their ground and they fought. Lost track of how many enemies she had killed. Her pistol ran out of charge twice and she picked up weapons from fallen attackers. Her knife was slick with blood. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, but she kept moving, she kept fighting, she would not stop until it was over. And then just as dawn was breaking over the station, something changed. The assault shuttles that had brought the Syndicate forces were suddenly under attack, but not from the station. The fire was coming from ships approaching at high speed from deep space. Recognized those ship signatures, United Earth Patrol vessels. The extraction team had arrived ahead of schedule. At the same moment, Lisa came running into the command center. Her face was bright with triumph and relief. She had news. The Merchants Guild had acted. They had used their influence to cancel the signal for Project Extinction. Their own forces were moving against Syndicate leadership across the entire sector. It was over, they had won. Slumped against the wall, the exhaustion that she had been holding back finally crashed over her like a wave. Around her she could hear the sounds of battle fading. People were cheering, some were crying, someone was praying quietly in the corner. They had done it, against all odds, and against an enemy that should have crushed them. They had survived. Daniel Shaw appeared beside her and offered her a container of water. He said it had been one hell of a fight. It reminded him of the old days. Drank deeply, then she smiled and asked if he thought the galaxy would underestimate humans next time. Daniel laughed. He said they probably would. They always did, but that was fine. They would just have to remind them again. The days after the battle were filled with cleanup and questions and a lot of paperwork. United Earth forces had taken control of the station, had been arrested along with dozens of other syndicate collaborators. The mercenaries who had survived were in custody waiting to be processed. Medical teams were treating the wounded and recovery crews were repairing the damage to the station. Spent most of her time giving reports and questions. Intelligence officers wanted to know every detail of what had happened. They wanted to understand how one security consultant had exposed a galaxy-wide conspiracy and stopped a coordinated assassination plot. She told them everything. She did not embellish or exaggerate, she just told them the truth. The truth was that she had been lucky that she had noticed the following her, lucky that had been careless with his files, lucky that Lisa had contacts in the right places, lucky that the extraction team had arrived when they did. But the intelligence officers saw something else. They saw skill and determination and the kind of instincts that could not be taught. They saw a human who had been backed into a corner and had fought her way out against impossible odds. That was that was who they were. The human community on Vila 9 had changed after that night. They walked a little taller now. They looked at the alien species around them with new confidence. They had proven something to themselves and to the galaxy. They were not weak, they were not helpless, they were survivors. Daniel Shaw was offered a position as the new head of station security. He accepted after some hesitation. He said he was getting too old for this kind of excitement, but someone had to make sure it never happened again. Thought he secretly enjoyed being back in action. Lisa Grant was evacuated to Earth as had promised. The intelligence service wanted to debrief her about her contacts within the syndicate, hoped they would treat her well. Lisa had risked everything to help them. She deserved to be protected. The ambassador came to see before she left the station. They said the collective had been watching the aftermath of the battle with great interest. Humanity had earned a new level of respect among the older species of the galaxy. They were not just dangerous, they were admirable. Thanked them for their support during the crisis. Made that wind chime sound that passed for laughter among their kind. They said they had not done much, they had simply observed, but they would remember, and they would tell others. Word spread fast in the galaxy. The story of what had happened on Vila 9 traveled from station to station and world to world. It grew with each telling as stories always do, but the core remained the same. A human had been cornered by killers, and when the fighting was over, only the floor was moving with the bodies of her enemies. 3 months later stood in the headquarters of United Earth Intelligence on Luna. She was receiving a commendation for her actions on Vila 9. The ceremony was brief and quiet. Intelligence work did not lend itself to public celebrations. Afterward, Director Hayes pulled her aside for a private conversation. He congratulated her on her work. He said the information she had recovered had already prevented 12 assassination attempts. The syndicate was in chaos with their leadership scattered and their operations exposed. But her mind was on other things. She asked about Project Extinction. She wanted to know if they had found the full scope of the plan. Hayes told her they were still investigating. It would take years to unravel everything, but they had the resources now, thanks to her. She asked about the other humans who had been marked for assassination, the targets of Project Extinction. Hayes allowed himself a rare smile. He said they were all safe, every single one. They had moved quickly once they had her data, not a single target had been harmed. Felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a tension she had been carrying for months finally released. It was not over, it would never really be over, not as long as humanity was expanding into a galaxy that did not fully understand them, but for now they had won, a real victory. Hayes told her he had a new assignment for her if she was interested. There was a situation developing in the Andromeda sector, something that required her particular skills. Considered the offer, she could retire, she had earned that, she could find a quiet life on Earth or one of the inner colonies, away from the dangers of frontier space, away from the violence and the death and the constant threat of extinction. But that was not who she was. She was a human, a child of she had been born on a planet that tried to kill everything on it. She had been shaped by millions of years of evolution that the strong and the smart and the determined. She had survived because her ancestors had never stopped fighting. She would them by doing the same. She told Hayes to brief her on the new mission. He, with approval, he had known what her answer would be before he asked. Walked out of the headquarters and looked up at the Earth hanging in the black sky above Luna. Her home, the planet that had made her what she was. She thought about everyone who had ever looked at that blue marble and called it dangerous. She thought about all the species in the galaxy who feared what came from that world. They were right to be afraid. Humans were not cruel, they were not evil, they did not want war or conquest or destruction, but they would not be pushed, they would not be threatened, they would not be cornered without consequence. The galaxy was learning that lesson now. Some learned it the easy way by watching from a distance, others learned it the hard way by trying to fight. Either way, the lesson was the same. Never corner a girl, because when you do only, the floor ends up moving. Smiled and walked toward her next adventure. The stars were waiting and she had work to do.